Had you from Procurement Foundry again. It's been a real busy week on the live streams and in studio audiences. Just getting started with the restreaming. So give me a couple of seconds and we will get started. Looks like we're live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. For some reason, LinkedIn takes a couple extra seconds on live streaming. I'm going to double check and make sure we are live on LinkedIn under the Procurement Foundry. So our 16,000 followers have a chance to actually consume this as well. And then I will lay down some house rules and then we'll get started on today's topic, which is IT asset management. Courtney Bruce says we're live on Twitter. Thank you, Courtney. I really appreciate that. And it looks like we are live on, are we live on LinkedIn? Can anybody tell me if we're live on LinkedIn? We should be live on LinkedIn. We were live on LinkedIn yesterday. Come on. I love the technical difficulties of restreaming across multiple technologies when you're trying to simulate being a broadcast network with one person. Although, hey, we're here. All right, cool. All right, so hi, everybody. I'm sorry that took a little bit longer than usual, but Mike Cadgett from Procurement Foundry again. This is a continuation of our ongoing topic of topics in technology. We are super excited to start up the second half of the year with topics in technology. You might notice for all of those who have been following topics in technology, which is our regular monthly occurrence of IT-related topics for our 1,500 IT buyers inside of Procurement Foundry. Little different look and feel to this. Matt Anders is not hosting this as he has for the last 18 months. So thanks to Matt for all of those dedicated months of and topics and discussions. NPI has stepped in, and NPI is a partner of Procurement Foundry, a permanent resident of Procurement Foundry. Most of you already know that. And we're super excited to have NPI sponsoring our topics in technology on an ongoing basis now. Kim Addington is with us from NPI, as well as Jim Hussey and some other folks. Michaela, James, Erin are all with us to talk about IT asset management today. James is currently flying missions over the Baltic Sea, so he may cut out from time to time. But that said, just a little bit of housekeeping for you right now. So those of you who have joined us inside of the LinkedIn, inside of the Zoom room, you are what I like to call the live studio audience. So you are here inside of the Zoom room. Thank you to those 30, 35 members of you that have come in. The chat and the Q&A is available to you. Please use the chat to tell us where you're from, and we'd love to hear where everybody's from. Please use the Q&A to ask questions of the panel so that we can register your Q&A as well. For those of you that are on LinkedIn and monitoring us on LinkedIn, wow, 25 people on LinkedIn already. For those of you watching us on LinkedIn, it's slightly tape delayed by about 5 or 6 seconds. That said, please use the chat inside of LinkedIn to send your questions. I will then revert those in from the background and I will give those off to Kim and the rest of the panelists so that they can see your questions live from LinkedIn as well as here inside the studio audience. All right, with that said, I'm really excited about this as a former IT technology sourcing executive myself. I'm really interested to hear about innovations in IT asset management. I kind of geek out on this topic a lot, so I'm really excited about it. Kim, please take away. I'm going to step to the background and you all have a wonderful day.
All right, thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kim Addington, Chief Operating Officer of NPI. A little bit about us in a nutshell, we're an IT procurement advisory firm that helps our clients get the best deal on IT purchases. We do price benchmark analysis, license optimization, and we help with EA renewals and software license audits. I've been with NPI for 11 years, and for 25 years prior to that, I was executive for several enterprise IT vendors in the middleware, application development tool, and legacy modernization categories. More important folks to introduce you to are our panelists. This morning I added it all up, and collectively they have almost 100 person years of experience in procurement and asset management. So I think we're going to learn a lot from them today. So let's start with Michaela. Can you tell our audience about your current responsibilities and a little bit about your background?
Good morning. My name is Michaela Nitschke. It almost feels like I personally could have the 100 years without even adding up James and Erin. but not quite, even though I have been doing asset management for the past 20 years. I work for Liberty Mutual and I manage their hardware and software asset management program there. My longer trajectory is with software, but hardware sort of fell into place. I have to say that in those 100 years, I am yet to have a year or a day when I am not surprised by something new or learn something new. So I know that when I started, somebody told me when you go into asset management, you're either going up in the company or you're going out. Neither was true. You're just going to be surprised every day and you're going to keep learning. So it's been quite a ride.
Thank you very much. Erin, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Erin Connolly. I am the Senior Sourcing Specialist in the software category for Pacific Life Insurance. I'm in the Enterprise Procurement Organization, and I've been doing IT procurement for about 25 years, and I did do a year and a half in IT asset management and was surprised at the involvement, but I think it was a really good getting your step into IT asset management for a little while. It just helps open your eyes extremely.
That's a great perspective that you'll bring to today's discussion. Thank you. Jim Hussey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, good morning, all. My name is Jim Hussey, and I've been with NPI now for the past 2.5 years. I lead the Saas and SAM optimization practice at the organization, so I have the fortunate benefit to work with many organizations on this subject. For the discussion today, I'll be combining my current experience with my former role, where I was at a corporate Western Union here in Denver, and I was responsible for IT asset management, vendor management, and other areas. So look forward to the conversation. And I must say, I love watching the Procurement Foundry chat as it goes along. It looks like a very interesting group of characters out there. So look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Jim. And finally, James, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, everyone. James Moy. I'm the Senior Director for Technology Asset Management for ViacomCBS. Recently merged company again, second time around, and overseeing hardware asset management, software licensing, and vendor management as well. But our main concentration is around software licensing, SaaS management, primarily, since that is a wonderful topic to be discussing today as well.
Thanks, James. So let's get started. You know, we all know that IT asset management is a challenge, and it's a challenge that keeps getting bigger and bigger as IT infiltrates every corner of the business. And as if it wasn't already hard enough, cloud is really a curveball that's impacting ITAM and procurement all over the planet. At its core, ITAM has two foundational objectives. One is cost management, and the other is compliance. And in the most well-oiled machines, procurement and ITAM are close allies in the pursuit of those objectives. But as our panelists are going to share with us, it's a rocky road, and achieving perfection is pretty challenging. So we're going to ask them to tell us about how they tackle ITAM in their companies and the intersection of ITAM and procurement, which is really what our audience is probably most interested in. So let's start with Michaela. Can you tell us about the role of ITAM at Liberty Mutual and the trends and challenges that you're seeing?
Sure. So we have a slightly unique structure, I think, from a number of other companies. For us, because of software asset management and the intersection between the technology teams that deploy the software and then the procurement teams that negotiate the contracts and create the rules for the entitlement use, we split our SAM into two areas. So we have a licensing team, a compliance team that sits under the procurement umbrella. And then we have the TAM team, the technology asset management team, and we sit under the technology umbrella, and we have a close alignment with the people that actually deploy. And together we have really like a dotted line between the procurement and the technology organization, which creates kind of the perfect structure for what we were talking about. You have no understanding and knowledge about contracts and about your entitlements that you have negotiated and what you actually own, what you purchased. And then we also have sponsorship all the way top down for actually doing the right thing when we deploy. So splitting it into the two umbrellas and kind of straddling both sides has been extremely successful for us at Liberty. I have been doing it for a long time. As I said, I'm joking about it, but it actually gives me a pretty unique and interesting perspective, because I remember the days when our problems in TAM largely focused on being able to find things on-prem, having the right discovery tools, and putting together inventory tools that would tell us what we actually have rights to, what we own, on top of, where are we going to deploy it on-prem, finding it then in the end. And we thought that was overwhelming. And then, boy, do I wish those days were back, because those were the good old salad days, I would say now. Because since then, as you said, we have the speed of technology change has just been incredible. We have first added virtual instances. So we went from physical items to virtual servers. Then we went to the cloud and to service management and dynamic scaling of resources. It's not that one thing has the same size and the same breadth as it did yesterday. And then the vendors have reacted to it by changing licensing models, and we saw a shift towards subscription model that enabled the software vendors to continue getting revenue. Just every day you're going to find something new. So whether it's reacting to technology and the change, or whether it's reacting to how software vendors have adjusted to that. What I find most interesting and most challenging is we still have the old problems. We still have traditional asset management. You still need to keep very good records. You still need to understand how you know what you procure and what your rights are. But now the speed with which you have to know it and react to it is really fast. And so you're trying to ride this train that you have been riding for a while and ride it well. And at the same time, you're switching the wheels constantly. So you can never be happy with where you are. You're constantly having to look at how you're doing things. Do you have options for automation? Do you have options for mining data differently, combining sources differently? It's never boring, but it's definitely a whole different ballgame.
How many people do you have that are assigned ITAM responsibilities in your organization?
So I'm lucky. I'm not gonna lie. I'm fortunate. Our sponsorship, our corporate sponsorship is pretty strong. So I have 15 people that straddle both hardware and software. Now, a couple of them are, specializing in certain things. So there's another, on top of the things like cloud or things like Saas, we see yet another angle, and that's security. And probably all companies see that. I mean, we see the situation in the industry with ransomware. So it goes back to, you may say, well, in TAM, how are you part of this? But it all goes back to the critical security controls. The first two foundational controls are hardware and software. I know what I have and I know where it is. So security has quickly become a very strong partner in this space. And so, yeah, it matters more than ever that our records are accurate. So some of my folks now focus on, all right, historically, we may have only inventoried servers and end user devices and maybe switches, routers, things of that nature in hardware. But now with the security posture, cameras, conferencing equipment, badging systems, you name it, if it has an IP, if it somehow enters my network, I need to know about it. that changes. It's like a little bit of shape shifting of what TAM does. The last thing I want is somebody else to start building an inventory. I need to be the source of inventory, but that means that I have to learn new trades and I have to start tracking different equipment, maybe different ways, but still I see that as a shift.
Yeah, that's a fascinating angle that when we were doing our prep sessions, we didn't even talk about that.
I know.
It's like its own subject, right?
Yes, it is.
So James, why don't you tell us, when we were doing our prep session, you have a really clear vision for IT asset management in your organization and the mindset for it. Why don't you share with us what you're leading your organization toward?
So if you think about mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures, right? And ViacomCBS is a newly formed company only for about a year and change right now. And obviously, in anyone that's been involved in those what I call MAD activities we will probably be living with the whole merger activities for another 2.5, probably 3 years or longer, right? Because you have all these duplicative systems all across multiple brands, multiple companies. And as Michaela had mentioned, right, on the hardware side and tracking hardware in that sense, right, it used to be on-prem. Now it's all cloud-based or just different type of equipment. So in a media company, we're tracking cameras, media equipment, lenses, lights, for shows and or for production areas, right? On top of that, right, you're concerned about software and SaaS software that is literally a plethora of tools within the environment, right? So you have to have definitely a clear vision. So we're actually taking a lot of our tools, doing an inventory of everything that we have, and then working with each technology groups to figure out what is the best tool for the company from an enterprise scale, and then funnel everything to those decided tools, whether it's 2, 3. It usually is not one specific tool. One size does not always fit all. So they usually wind up having to be 2 or 3, possibly X number, but no more than 5. And then you force everyone into that consolidation and you eliminate all your other spend that is outside, whether it's on credit card or it's through a contract or through someone just ordering stuff willy-nilly without having any rules or process in place.
So what's the number one challenge? We're getting a question from our audience. What's the number one challenge you have? We'll kind of go round robin here. If you had to pick one.
The number one challenge is building those relationships across all your business stakeholders and all the brands that we have to tell the story of what you're trying to do and sell that story to them to say, hey, we could help you reduce your cost, keep the company out of the crosshairs of all the software vendors from a compliance point of view, as well as make the business run faster. We can get you software faster. The way and Michaela and everyone else that said it, everything moves so fast, right? To quote Ferris Bueller, if you don't stop and smell the roses, you're just gonna miss it, right? So it's the same thing in ITAM and SAM. There's so many things that are changing, particularly coming out of a pandemic year where all the software publishers are taking one SKU and breaking it up to monetize. That's what everybody is doing.
So Erin, what do you see as the number one challenge?
I call it herding the cats. So you've got software, especially the subscription softwares, the SaaS, that, they get purchased by pockets of the business. And then when you try to wrangle those cats and bring it up to an enterprise level so that from a procurement standpoint, you can negotiate it, there's a lot of moving parts that need to be addressed, especially because everybody has their own little stake in the softwares. And it's getting that enterprise focus. That seems to be a very large challenge.
And how are you organized to tackle it?
We are working on the process. We are formalizing our ITAM team, trying to get the proper governance in place, getting the enterprise architecture. There's so many parts to SaaS that needs to go through a governance committee in order to make sure that everybody's stake gets addressed and what they want from the product. And then you also have your technology and your security concerns, getting that SSO, making sure the proper security gates and that your data is secure, which is very, very important, us being a financial institution.
Yeah, yeah.
which is a whole new, so James was talking about how important it is to have the right relationships with our customers. What we've seen over time too is the stakeholders that are coming to the table are different stakeholders. So where, be it security, so we have partnered with procurement for a long time. We have to, because to do asset management, you compare what you own versus what you use. But now with security, with a much tighter relationship to the product owners, because they have a lot more say in what they buy, with SaaS tools coming up like mushrooms, and people wanting to try new experiences faster. The stakeholders and having them educated and having them be behind the concept of them is really critical. So it's a pretty interesting table, like Erin's saying, that
Right.
you now have, that you see people around.
And I'll jump in quick. I think tagging on what everyone has said so far, and Michaela, a great point, is probably the best friends to an ITAM organization going forward. In addition to InfoSec, in our world is going to be compliance, third-party risk, governance, risk, and compliance. And what happens, I think, and what I've observed both in my corporate role and here at MPI is we at ITAM, we get enamored with data, right? We love talking data and throwing up our dashboards. But if I'm talking to risk and compliance and InfoSec and IT finance and sourcing, I've got a language barrier, right? I don't necessarily understand my sponsor and stakeholders' goals, objectives, how they're being measured. And as James said earlier, taking the time to understand that and then being able to look at all the intelligence you can deliver to those individuals that meet their needs, it now elevates ITAM up, higher visibility, more contribution, more value. But I do think it's the, as you say, InfoSec, risk, compliance, all of them are our best friends as we now wrestle with, SaaS, infrastructure as a service, cloud centers of excellence, and all these other proliferation of teams that have popped up in the organization.
And one of the things we talked about that is that that's tough to measure. So one thing James mentioned is that he comes at it, the measurement from the cost management perspective sort of gets him the seat at the table. And then all this ring of other value around that. Can you speak to that a little bit, James, and how that helps you get the kind of support that you need?
I'm actually lucky, just like Michaela, because we have a great corporate sponsor who happens to be our CTO of ITAM, and he understands the view of ITAM. But I would agree with what you said, Jim, and everyone here about cost management and getting a view. So data analytics will give you your backing of saying, hey, we spend 500, let's say, just say 500 million on hardware, but we're spending almost, 700 million on software and all these various products. If you do a discovery of what you have in your environment and then compare that to your spend analytics, whatever that system that you have currently, and you see what you're buying from a software perspective, not just software as an application, but software in general that are related to servers, to networks, to the business units, right? And you take all of that, and then you break that down between actual contracts versus expense that's being spent on credit card, you're going to see a very massive difference. And then you have to figure out where you want to concentrate on, right? Because your data analytics will give you the backing to at least promote your ITAM and SAM programs, because it's there. It's literally, I think the devil is in the details, right? Particularly in contracts. It's the same thing with ITAM. You can actually promote your program utilizing the data that we already have, even though it's like multiple sources.
Jim, how have you seen companies go about doing that and prioritizing where you spend your energy? You're muted, Jim.
Sorry about that. When we were chatting in the pre-call, I look at it this way: is when I was responsible for hardware asset, The focus obviously was around maintenance and reducing cost, and that's a good area from an efficiency standpoint, but it was IT finance viewed that as a nice to have. I think the reality is for all of us in ITAM circles, the unknown is software audits. And that's where you can get completely sucked in, distract everybody from what it is they really want to work on, because your exposure could be very, very significant. Even though Michaela described in her organization, it sounds like that would be well done. So I think most of the focus today is still around protecting yourself against audit and figuring out how do you optimize this new subscription model, and how do you appropriately manage those subscriptions. So I think that to me would be the primary focus that I see across the teams we work with.
The question to all of our panelists: are you seeing increased software license audit occurrences this year?
Yes.
Yes.
So Erin, tell us about what you're experiencing.
We've had a couple of audit notices this year already. I mean, it's by March, I believe we had 2 software audits in progress. We're trying to write, there's a lot of software recently that used to be free that is not free anymore. We found Anaconda now needs to have a commercial version to it. The Oracle Java needs to have license to it now. So you are trying to approach the vendors to right size your licensing, because it does require license now, and they are wanting to do a soft audit or something of that sort, which, it's like, just, I want to buy my license, go away. I don't know how else to say it that way. And then typical, audits. I don't want to say which vendors.
Well, from MPI's perspective, because we service a lot of clients, I mean, the usual suspects are Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, Quest. I'm missing a big one.
We've seen Quest has turned almost to like a Micro Focus type of model.
Yeah.
Buy, purchase and audit. That's what we've been seeing.
Yeah. And where does that responsibility for managing those fit in your organizations? Does that all fall under ITAM, procurement?
It's a group effort. So enterprise procurement also is where all the contracts live. So we provide them the entitlements, the purchase history data, all of that good stuff. And then the ITAM team is the one that runs with the compliance and the business and the discovery.
Yeah. Michaela, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely still seeing the usual suspects, like the caliber of Micro Focus, who like to come in periodically, the old attached mate. Goodness, we have seen them all. But to Erin's point, we're seeing slightly different thing. We're seeing smaller players that are changing licensing structures from open source to licensable components. And the components is a key piece here, because they're adding a level of complexity that we haven't seen before. If you just take the Oracle Java, it's not just Java. You have to understand your JDKs and your SDKs, yes. And you have to understand your standard. And then there is, well, if you use it this way for this purpose, it's licensable. So the rules become so convoluted that straightforward software discovery of binaries, the likes of SCCM, is no longer sufficient to answer you with certainty. This is your optimized position. It becomes more difficult. You now have to mine the data to various degrees to be able to say, rather than giving you everything, this is what I believe my position is. And that's a challenge. They know that. So we have definitely seen that shift, and it's not just Oracle, it's other smaller companies that are doing that. And it's a pretty interesting, they're mining the opportunity for their advantage, which is their business. But yeah, it definitely brings an angle to us.
And what's interesting is again, back in my former life, I went to Gartner, Forrester, I went to them all because what I wanted to do was make certain that I had a team internally prepared. And the reason I did that was because my first audit that I lived through was IBM. And quite frankly, I felt like, I pulled a meeting together. I had all my leaders in the room. I laid out to them, our notification and what we need to do. And they all said, yeah, great, Jim, let us know how we can help. And they walked out, right? So it's like, how do you coordinate and create that internal awareness that it's really a shared obligation to support and maintain compliance? So as you were talking, Erin, Michaela, you think about everything we're talking about, what ITAM needs to be doing moving forward, yet we feel like we keep getting pulled back and dealing with audits and the complexity and the binaries and all of these things. So it's really a stress for the operation. James, I don't know if that's what you're experiencing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Erin and Michaela and everyone. It is a shared responsibility, but it does start with ITAM and SAM primarily because our model is basically an audit response team that makes up multiple orgs or multiple business areas, including particularly legal, right? Procurement, vendor management, the SAM folks, the technology folks, because you're going to leverage them to do reporting, scanning of the environment, and then obviously whoever the application owners that you're being audited for from whatever publisher that Kim mentioned. And Kim basically mentioned what I call the big six, usually, because those guys are the most troublesome in the environment outside what I call ankle biters. I mean, your spend could be really small, and then they'll come up and sneak behind you and then bite you because they just want to get into the game because they're generating revenue, right? Because that's what audits do. They generate revenue. So obviously a shared responsibility, but it does start with SAM to pull that all together because we are more than just bean counters or widget counters, right? We are headlights to the corporation, both from a compliance, from a cost optimization point of view, as well as partnering with procurement, vendor management, sourcing, right? To get not just better pricing, but just to make sure that we're buying things in the right manner, not even the margins, but the right amount for the organization to utilize, right? So I think what you mentioned, Jim, I think there needs to be more education for the corporations or the companies to basically say, hey, compliance is everyone's job to protect the company because it's all company-wide. It's not just one team or several groups. So I think, and if you want, I could share a deck for education to anyone that wants it. And it's basically we're actually going through a HR process to get that deck for any new employee starting, and then have that what I call a yearly compliance report or course, so people are reminded, hey, software licensing is important in the corporation.
Great idea. That's a great idea. Because it's not just buying a license, it's the type of license that you're buying as well, especially for the SaaS. It needs to be able to be mobilized for the environment that you're putting it into, right? I mean, if you're going to be putting this to a whole bunch of users spread across possible different divisions of your company, you need to be able to centrally manage that asset.
Yeah, agree.
I think
yeah, go ahead, Michaela.
No, I think the education you're talking about is absolutely essential, especially now. We have a workforce that is varied and is made up of people who are used to consuming software in a whole different way than we did 20 years ago. We did not have access to be downloading apps at a moment's notice that appeared to be free, or if I can do this at home, then I should be able to do it on my work computer. Those are all different things. So that instant delivery and that selection of a tool that is going to most fit my need goes completely against the portfolio management and the inventory and the cost control we're trying to perform here. So very different set of consumers that we have today. So educating them why we may be curbing their enthusiasm on having every tool is important, and setting the right guardrails for behavior as they come in is probably the perfect time to do it. So partnering with HR is great.
Yeah, and you know, I fortunately have the chance to speak with a lot of the SaaS management platform organizations, and they're really doing great things. But they talk about, you know, empowering the user, and coming from a financial background, as you know, we all are here, that scares the heck out of me. So the opportunity, again, I think subscriptions and the use of this model is forcing organizations to revisit their policies, revisit the controls, and then obviously the mechanisms to enforce those controls. But really educate the teams that, you know, there's needs to be a balance between employee, let's say, satisfaction or productivity, or, you know, empowerment. It has to be balanced against the corporate challenges, right? So I think I shared the story how, you know, my compliance leader had stood the door about data that was supposed to be within the borders of one country was being used by our marketing team in a different country. And lo and behold, you know, the issue of SaaS governance became top of mind at my organization. So, you know, I think you're absolutely right, Michaela, that it's these controls, these processes, the ability for them, organizations, to quickly move through the validation process of SaaS, but do so and then constantly measure. Again, we talked about risk. So I've seen clients sit down and look at their SaaS portfolio and then assign a risk categorization to certain suppliers, and that gets a lot of attention from the risk and compliance leadership within their firms.
Yeah, you got to balance that enablement, allowing the business to have the tools they want and need while still balancing the risk and the cost. You know, because you're going to have many tools that can do the same things.
Yeah. And I think so that's a little bit of a pendulum swing, really, right? So with the, it started with the Lean Six Sigma and all of the kind of leaning out and delivering things faster, getting products out to our users and our customers, external customers as well, faster. Well, it drove the processes in Agile. Agile is built. I need to do it now. I need to iterate. So trying new things, that pendulum swung a little too far. And you had cloud. So now it wasn't just in your walls. Now it was outside of your walls. And then the choices were many. And what we're seeing is, yes, it is great to empower our employees. It is great to be agile. Those are all extremely great benefits. But that's a key word. There's got to be some kind of governance. So I think we're now seeing a little bit of a shift back into what is the right level of governance. And I think that appetite is going to be different based on the industry you're in and the company you're in, the setup you have, the sponsorship you have. And yeah, in some cases, you know, there's going to be some kind of continuum of that. So it's kind of interesting watching that happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Michaela, because it will probably be, there's got to be obviously some requirements from a corporate standpoint, and then each department, whatever their tool sets are, will be different for each area, because obviously not one, the tax department won't be using the same tools that the marketing or the audit department will be using. So it'll be unique to each area and business department. So.
Yeah, I find a lot of times, you know, people will say, well, we can rationalize down. We have 10 different project management platforms, but everybody likes to fight for their own because theirs is specific to their needs. So, you know, I don't know if it's worth that battle, other than trying to help them maybe consolidate and you know, get a little bit of volume into those agreements. But I think you're right, James. Each of these units have different charters, different objectives, and they need to have the freedom to select the tools. We just want to make sure that they meet the minimum criteria for us to protect our business.
Agreed. And I think Erin hit it on the nail. There is a very fine line in terms of governance and then what we allow the end users to do. And there's got to be some middle ground in between.
Well, let's shift gears for just a second. Under the ITAM umbrella, we've got software asset management, which we've kind of ended up focusing on mostly so far today. And then there's hardware asset management. So talk a little bit about how hardware asset management, where that fits in, and how maybe that's changing or has been changing over the past few years.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start. So certainly cloud is and when we say hardware, it's sort of funny when I say cloud, but those are your resources. It's where I install software. So where in the past hardware used to be the discipline where I was like, oh, if I want to deal with something today, let it be hardware because at least I can find it, I can touch it, it should be doable, but that no longer is the case. So I think the biggest challenge we have right now is tooling in the cloud space. And that cloud could be even your on-prem cloud. There, the tooling may be a little bit simpler, but the challenges still exist as to understanding what you have and how dynamically it changes. And then obviously the options for public cloud. So do you record your cloud instances? I think I saw a question actually go by. Somebody was asking, how do you manage that? Well, it probably depends on what you do with cloud. So part of what you have to look at is how transient or how dynamic is your cloud instance and what are you using it for? And that drives a lot of decisions that we're making. So we have chosen not to inventory the cloud instances exactly the same way that we have servers and workstations that are physical or even virtual on-prem because of their dynamic nature. But that now gives us yet another source of truth. Now I have cloud inventory here, and then I have my traditional hardware in another inventory. So what that forces us to do, and we're going to see that more and more because SaaS tools are different tools, we're seeing the need for very strong data management. I know Jim said we all live for data. Well, we need it in many cases, and now we need to bring it together. So having reporting and data mining and really strong kind of intelligence behind reporting to be able to bring it together is oftentimes a better thing. But yes, you should absolutely evaluate, do I put cloud into my inventory? Well, if you can manage lifecycle well, and you can actually figure out what's live and what should be there, then maybe that's a good option. But if not, maybe you want to merge it together some other way.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of people moving to the cloud. Obviously, we have software licenses and there's implications there. But one of the things that we observe is they'll stand up the cloud instance, and part of that business case was the removal or elimination of the on-prem environment. But there's never that linkage, and all of a sudden your footprint has grown, and the CIO is asking why are costs out of control. So that linkage that you just spoke of, Michaela, is critical to be able to say, if you're going to stand this up, you need to tear this down and get it offline, and recycle. So hopefully the discipline there comes a little more. And I think that may happen because, cloud COEs proliferated 10 years ago, right? And they ran off and they owned all things cloud. But now as we sit here, cloud is now just, how we, our infrastructure. So it's commonplace. And now all those principles need to be linked up very closely.
Right.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Okay. No, just to add on to what both of you have said, right? And the shift in hardware asset management is basically, on-prem. You still have it, but it's smaller because a lot of financial firms or even media companies or even companies in general, we used to manage our own data centers, right? We used to have a huge data center, manage your own hardware, and obviously the cost got too many. And then all of a sudden, hey, co-location, we'll manage it for you. The cloud came on, but it's not really cloud. You're literally just renting from other providers. It's still hardware. It's someone else's data center. You're either renting or leasing. So the cloud, I think it's kind of an oxymoron, right, Jim? But at the same time,
I'm laughing because you missed one thing, James. First, the organization said, "Hey, can we monetize our data centers?" Right?
Agree. But to expand on what both of you said is that, and I totally agree with you, Michaela. You have to keep track of your virtuals and your on-prem. You already have it on-prem; it's in your hardware system. The virtual side, if you don't keep track of it, obviously the cost will exponentially increase year over year, month over month, day over day, because obviously if you look at the charges, whether it's AWS, GCP, Azure, you have to look at the charges. What I think the model that all these cloud providers have, even the small ones, is that putting your data, keep in mind, this is your data, is free, putting it in. Getting your data out is going to cost you, and you look at the cost, sometimes it's 35 cents, or even not even, maybe 2 cents, 10 cents. Doesn't look like it's not a lot. But if you look at your in and out from a database point of view, and you have to check your developers, right? They're going to be exporting data back and forth. And you're not talking about gigabytes, you're talking about terabytes or petabytes. Over time, that's going to cost you. I've seen people go into AWS or any other cloud provider, go in thinking that, hey, this is going to save us money. It costs them more money because of the in and out of the data. Forget about the EC2 instances that you stand up and then you leave on because someone tested something and then forgot to turn it off. That's where your costs go rampant if you don't keep an eye on the bill.
Within procurement, we have like a checklist of items of when we're signing new cloud agreements, and the egress fees are on there as a flag. Make sure you negotiate these egress fees, because they can cost you sometimes more to get your data out of a product than it can cost you to initially purchase that product in the first place.
Yep. I think this is another opportunity, at least that's how we have approached it, where you build those new partnerships. So you have the cloud deployment team, you have sort of the new way, the pipelines, and then you have to have a process similar to what change management existed on the ITIL side, where you know what they're planning to do. And there is some kind of a consult where you say, if I take this type of database out, what are the costs? Is it better for me to do it here on-prem, or is it cheaper for me to do it in the cloud? And then we build these use cases together with the technology teams, where we brought the procurement teams together, the asset management teams, the technology teams, the app teams, and basically said, okay, if you do it this way, if you, buy this type of database service, or if you have these fees, or if you, whatever it may be, and then you say, they have some kind of guidelines. So it won't be exactly specific, but it gives them an idea of, it may not always be cheaper. It may still be the right choice, but it may not be cheaper, but they go in eyes wide open. And I think that's important to do. You may not be able to do it for every single deployment, but at least to build those patterns so people have an idea is really critical, because otherwise you're going to have surprises that nobody likes to see.
Let's explore for a second. Are there technologies that any of you use to help you manage all of this and do your job? And what sort of holes do you see in the technology stack, or opportunities for improvement, where you wish? We'd had some questions from people who are listening in on technologies.
Here at Pacific Life, our ITAM team uses Flexera and their Saas management platform. And in the procurement, we're using Coupa to manage our contracts, and we are using RSA Archer as our third-party risk platform. I would love to see more integration between the three. It's a lot of manual integration, right, to get all your tools to talk together. I would love to see these tools really start organically talking to each other, instead of everything has to be APIs and pointed. And if you don't get your pointers in exactly the right place, then you will have a hole in your visibility.
So I think, Erin, I'm betting like you that Archer, for example, being the leader in the third-party risk space, GRC space, I would think that they're looking very closely at the SaaS management platform, Xylos and the others. I'm anticipating and hoping that there's more integration that you're speaking of. But that tends to be, really where the focus today is around tooling. In terms of the SaaS management or SaaS application management world, certainly Flexera, Snow, USU kind of dominate the space. I was a Flexera shop. And I think what happens is the teams or organizations underestimate the level of effort and manpower necessary to harness those powerful tools. So it sounds like, Michaela, you have a very good staff. In terms of contract management, I was very fortunate. I used a really great tool called Syrian Labs in my day. And what was nice is that tied together a lot of our outsourcing data. That was really the contract management and tying that all together. But a lot of tools have entered the market, certainly, and you always have the built for purpose tools, and then you have what I call the expansion tools, right? Like people who want to add a module, the ServiceNow method, right? We can do it all. So there's no shortage of options.
Yeah, to add to that, I don't believe one tool will fit your needs or one size will fit all. It really depends on your organization and what you want to manage, both from hardware, software, contracts, license, right? You have to evaluate what your requirements are and figure what that is, and then go through your, what I call evaluation and POC of those plethora of tools that are available. Do not ever get sold by any salesperson that says they will do it all and do it right. A tool will not fix your process, will not fix your procedures or your policy. That is developed with a group of people in your organization, starting with ITAM, SAM, procurement, right? It starts there. You decide all that. The tool should fit your process, and it should be an add-on and enhancement to whatever your process and policy is. So for any tools that are in the environment, evaluate it, test it until it breaks. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, James, I absolutely totally agree. We get a lot of calls saying, what tool should we evaluate? It's like, wait, time out. Everything that you just said, James, we need to do that first, and it'll point towards the tool. Then the tool decision gets very, very easy.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've got 8 minutes left, and we wanted to go round robin around our panelists and ask them what's one takeaway as we've prepared for this session, as they do this work every day, and as we've talked through it today together. What's one takeaway that you want to leave our audience with for the future? So let's start with Erin.
I'd say collaboration. I see a lot of folks that are talking about credit card spend, that, that shadow IT that everybody has been talking about for years. Really going to have to work with all your finance teams, the part of your company that runs the credit card program, the people that are approving the expense reports and keep reimbursing those. You need to work to get policy in place to say, hey, slap the hand, then we're not going to reimburse these anymore. You need to go through the right process, and here's your well-defined process, and not make it too onerous for your folks to go through.
Thank you. Michaela.
Yeah, Erin stole my find your friends. And there are a few. It's definitely finance. It's definitely procurement for them. It's the technology team, but a strong sponsorship. And then brush up on your data management skills. So you will still need data. You will have it in different places. So your staff needs to be very comfortable with navigating the data engineering and data analysis spaces to be successful, because there's a lot of it now, not less, more.
That's good advice. And where do you find the right talent? You're the one with the wonderful 15-person team.
I know, and they're amazing. I am fortunate, so lucky. You build it oftentimes, Kim, because right now getting data engineering skills in the industry is very, very hard. It takes quite a bit of time to find people, and some of the newer technologies are even harder to hire for. So training, building your staff. I mean, the TAM I remember days when in ITAM, we were celebrating that we were an actual job role, because who were we before, right? Like, oh, we're this hodgepodge of skill set. And I think there is a stronger emphasis on we are a role, and data management may be a very big part of it, but that analysis and that sort of business insight invaluable, because it connects the technology and it connects some of the softer skill, which pardon me, procurement, I don't mean any of that is softer skill, but some of that business money skill into it. And that's a real art, and that's desirable. So building our people, investing in our people, that we have to continue doing that.
You've done it. Okay. James, what's your takeaway?
I totally agree with everyone that has spoken on it, but I think there's two things. One is the data management and data warehousing. The key thing that I've started here is creating what I call a data lake. Take all your sources. You have a plethora of sources, funnel it into a data lake, whatever that system may be. Pick one. There's a lot of them in there. And then put all your sources there. Normalize your data or your fields, and then start writing reports. Or you can create can reports from a system generated, tool, right? Because once you have all your sources there, HR data, software, hardware, virtual, employee data, you name it, everything is in one place versus trying to pull in, because Michaela put it on, in the old days, we used to be pulling from here, 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 put it in a spreadsheet and try to marry that. We can't do that anymore, because obviously there are tools out there, Power BI, you name it. They can do that for you, and Tableau can actually make it really look pretty, right? So data lake, and obviously building out those relationships, the training that Michaela mentioned, not just for your internal teams, but for your business owners, your technology owners, everyone that is in the company is our customer, right? You have to educate them and tell them to be mindful of licensing and hardware, but at the same time, hey, we're here to help. So,
thank you, Jim.
Yeah, to everyone's point, the interesting thing is the subject of software as a service, SaaS, is of great interest to everybody. So the opportunity to bring the team together and collaborate and form a comprehensive, unified approach is very real. Whereas with hardware or software, it was a little harder to get people engaged. And if I were building a team based on what you just talked about, James, with the data lake, is I would hire software auditors, right? I would find people, they think differently, they triangulate data, they come up with amazing insights that can then be very, very powerful when presented in Tableau and other formats. So that would be my recommendations.
Thank you very much. Before I turn the floor back over to Mike for closing comments, a bunch of requests came through as you were all talking. Erin for your checklist, and James for your education presentation. And so all of our listeners today, please know that you can direct connect with these folks through the Slack channel in Procurement Foundry, and you can direct connect with Jim through the NPI Slack channel in Procurement Foundry, excuse me. So that's one way to get what you're looking for. I'm sure they didn't catch all of it as they were paying attention to what we were saying. So thanks very much, everybody. It was great. I'll turn this over to Mike to send us off.
Hey, everybody, it's Mike again. Thank you so much. Wow, absolutely amazing discussion. Sorry, I lost a headset there. I was so blown away. Yeah, wow, some amazing nuggets regarding areas of focus, how to design your team, what products people are using, things to focus on. So thank you to everyone for today's participation. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you for MPI's continued sponsorship. Obviously, if you've got questions around software or hardware technology related consultancy services, NPI are readily available and can be contacted through both the Procurement Foundry and through events like this. We will be tagging everybody in our posts. I look forward to this again. I think there's probably 6 or 7 more conversations we could have spun off from this one. So I look forward to inviting you back, whether that's at conferences or in further panel discussions to talk more about this topic. Thank you very much for giving me your time today and to giving our community your time today. And if you have more questions around IT asset management, don't forget, inside of the Procurement Foundry, we have a room dedicated to IT technology sourcing with 1,600 people in it. So if you can't get an answer in that room, you probably can't get an answer. All right, that's it for now. Thank you so much. It's 12 o'clock. We really appreciate it. Thanks to the folks at LinkedIn for sticking with us today. Thanks for the live
everybody.
studio audience, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good day.
Bye.
Bye.